You know, Nat, like, if you listen to K-pop, don't you think you should at least be able to like read the song title? And I was like, wow, okay, that was a bit shady, but you have a point. Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. I'm 24 years old, and I'm originally from London, England, but I moved to North Carolina when I was a wee 7-year old. Anyways, so my favorite K-pop group is Shiny. I have many K-pop groups that I stan. I love Twice, Dreamcatcher, 2PM, Super Junior, but Shiny's my number one. In Shiny, my favorite is Choi Mino. He's my number one. Okay, I love him very much. But all of Shiny is great. Taemin solo comeback, chef's kiss. So how I got into K-pop was actually through Super Junior M, which is a Chinese subgroup of Super Junior, which sounds very confusing, which it is. Super Junior is very confusing the first time you meet them, but it's fine. It's fine. So a friend of mine showed me their song Perfection, and I was just hooked. That song was so catchy, it was so great, and I listened to it truly like 20 times a day. I listened to it so much, I ended up hating it. Like hating it because I listened to it so much. So what I ended up doing was I just looked at the recommended page and was like, let me try this other Super Junior M song. And that just kind of led down a rabbit hole of Super Junior songs. But I never really like went outside of Super Junior. I still kind of didn't really get too deep into K-pop at that point. But then one day, I stumbled upon Shiny's Hello, and that was it for me. I listened to like every Shiny song. I loved them so much. Even though I listened to all their songs an excessive amount of times, I still loved every single one of them. And post Shiny, I started finding other groups on my recommended page, and that's just how it just I just went down that rabbit hole. If you're a K-pop fan, you know exactly what I mean by the rabbit hole. It's like a black hole of K-pop darkness, okay? And although I'm not as into K-pop anymore, there was definitely a time that I was deep in the sauce, okay? But I still love Shiny with all my heart. When I was into K-pop and real deep in it, I kind of still I don't want to say dissociated with it, but I just listened to it. I didn't watch K-dramas. I didn't really try to learn anything. I was just kind of like, it's music I listen to. I like to listen to it when I study. The end. I didn't buy any merch because I'm poor. Okay. But in general, it was just music for me. But when I got into college, I had this one friend, and she said, "You know, Nat, like, if you listen to K-pop, don't you think you should at least be able to like read the song title?" And I was like, wow, okay, that was a bit shady, but you have a point. So I joined this club at my school because my school didn't teach Korean, but they had like a student organization that taught Korean. So I joined it, and in like 1 or 2 days, I learned the Korean alphabet, Hangul, and I was like, this is so easy. I'm a genius. This language is so easy. I'm just gonna learn it for fun, like not even for K-pop. It's just so easy. Why not? Listen, if you're studying Korean right now and you're thinking like I did, you're wrong. Korean is not easy. It's not easy. Like, if you already know like Japanese or Chinese or like a language that has a similar structure to Korean, like you'll be fine. But if you speak like English or Spanish, it's gonna be a tough ride. All right, so just be prepped. Um, but I still decided to keep up with Korean because I like a challenge, and it was not to sound like snobby, but it was the first challenge I had had in a really long time. So I decided to eventually just study abroad in Korea and just try and learn the language better. And it was the first time I was really gonna be by myself in a different place. So I just thought, yeah, you know what? Why not? If I'm gonna pay this money to be an exchange student, let's make the jump. Let's just dive in deep because that's who I am. I went to Yonsei University for one semester, and I think I was like 19 at the time. And it was truly the greatest experience of my life. It's like when people tell you that you like find yourself in college. I never had that experience, but when I went to Korea and I was like genuinely by myself in like a completely different place, different culture, different language, everything, I really did grow. I really did change and become, I think, someone better. I used to be like really shy, never really approach people first, but when I was put into that situation, I was really able to thrive and become a lot more confident in myself. And it was a great experience. And I love Korea itself. Like, I never watched any K dramas, so I went in with like zero expectations, and I think that was what was best for me. But I really loved it, and it really did help me to grow and become a better person. So after I came back from Korea when I was an exchange student, I had a really difficult time with reverse culture shock. So that's essentially like going back to the culture you were once in. And I had just a really hard time. When you're in Seoul, it's a big city, you go out all the time, and then you come back to North Carolina and you're just like, what is there to do? And I don't drink really, and especially because I was under 21, that lessened even more so what I could do in a college area. So it was very difficult for me to maintain that same confidence I grew when I was in Korea. It kind of started to die down a little bit. And once I graduated university, I started working at a healthcare IT company. And although I learned a lot at that company, I made a lot of great friends and gained a lot of great experience, I realized it just was not for me. And I really was unhappy at that job. I was just so unbelievably unhappy. I had a lot of family things going on at that time, a lot of things with friends. It was just a really low point in my life. And I felt really stuck because it was a good paying job. I'm not gonna say I was making like six figures or anything, but it was good for someone who just graduated college. But I was just incredibly unhappy. And as time went on, I realized like this just isn't for me. And like another job in a different IT company isn't gonna make me any happier because IT isn't for me. I don't know what is for me, but it's not IT. So I was really, confused on what I should do. I didn't know anything really. I was just completely lost. And I had reached out to an old friend of mine when I was an exchange student, and she told me that she was actually going to go back to Korea and teach for a year. And I thought, maybe I should do that. Korea's the first time I was by myself, and it was the first time I grew so much as an individual. Maybe if I go there again and I'm by myself working as an adult, I can have that experience again and maybe find who I am. So I decided to teach in Korea for a year. And being in Korea as an adult in a job is very different than being a student. It's still great, still love Korea. I don't think I want to work there though. I worked in a hagwon, so like a private academy, and I worked essentially 10-hour shifts every single day. So I would teach 60 kids a day. It was tough. Give teachers a raise. Like give teachers a raise because the amount of work teachers do is so much. I know this has nothing to do with K-pop, but like give teachers a raise. We deserve it. Okay? When I was there actually, I did grow a lot, but it was not like the first time I grew a lot. This time I had a lot of time to really think and be by myself, and I realized that I had a lot of issues that I had been avoiding. So I had a lot of insecurities from, previous relationships, not necessarily romantic relationships, but like friend relationships that I was still holding on to and still putting onto other people. I still had a lot of insecurities that I realized I never really truly dealt with that were affecting me. I also realized teaching was not for me, but that's why I'm back in America. But I still loved those kids. But I realized a lot about, I guess, just like my mental health, what was important to me, because although I loved living in Korea, it was just so difficult for me to be so far away from my family. And I loved living in Korea, but I don't think I was in the mental place to be there yet. And I mean, Korea doesn't have many things that help with mental health. So I think I knew I had to go back home and improve and get better so that I could be a better friend and be a better daughter and everything, and just be a better person in general. And it was definitely definitely went through a lot of rough patches and probably lashed out at a lot of people that I shouldn't have, but that's something I realized. I realized that there were a lot of things I still had to deal with. And now coming back to America to COVID, I've had nothing but time to deal with those issues. So although COVID is truly the most terrible thing in existence, if I have to take a pro, I guess that's one thing. Being in Korea, though, it was kind of strange because I think I expected to be more into K-pop because, like, I mean, you're in Korea. Like, K-pop is everywhere. Korean music is everywhere. But I actually ended up kind of getting out of K-pop. Like, even when I was an exchange student, I think that was kind of the point where it started to go down. Ironically, going to Korea made me less into K-pop. When I first was an exchange student, I still was really into K-pop. It just didn't become as much of a priority to me. But once I actually lived there, I think that was kind of the point that I really was like, I still like K-pop, but I don't necessarily seek out new groups. I became more in love with Korea itself than with K-pop. I just really loved that in Korea I could just hang out with friends and it didn't have to involve drinking or shopping. Like, we could just go get some tea or a non-alcoholic beverage and just hang out in a cafe for a really long time. Food is such a big part of the culture and it's so nice, and eating is an experience with friends. It's not just like something you like get over with because you don't feel like cooking. It was just such a great experience that I didn't really care as much about the K-pop aspect of everything. And also there's just a lot of other genres that I found that I really enjoyed, like the alternative rock scene, the R&B scene, low-key the hip-hop scene. But I haven't been into that as much, but that's not the point. Back then I was. But I just found so much more in Korea than just K-pop. Still love SHINee though. SHINee's still my number one. So like, don't get it confused. Okay.